But let's move into the next topic. Before we do so, check us out on iTunes. Search The Fast Break on iTunes. You'll find us. We got the orange logo with all 30 NBA teams and should be The Fast Break. It's pretty easy to find. We're closing in on 40 reviews, so if you want to go over there, give us a 5-star review, type in a nice comment. We'd greatly appreciate it. It takes very, very quickly to do so as well. But let's jump in, boys. We were talking about, should the Grizzlies trade Marc Gasol and or Mike Conley? I think it's just going to be titled, should the Grizzlies trade Marc Gasol and Mike Conley? But we'll figure it out throughout this topic. So obviously the Grizzlies are on the downswing. They started off pretty hot. They were in the playoffs.
Someone said downcline.
I was waiting for the downcline.
I was trying not to say it. They started off in the playoffs to start the season. Marc Gasol was playing fantastically. Mike Conley was at all-star level. Still hasn't dropped off too much from that. But since then, Marc Gasol's dropped off. This team's faced injuries. Both Brooks have left. Dillon to injury, Marshawn to the Bulls and got waived. And it's just been bad recently in Memphis. And Marc Gasol and Mike Conley met with the ownership of the Grizzlies to discuss the Grizzlies' future. So immediately that brings up either the fact that the Grizzlies might get sold is the biggest thing, possible GM change in Chris Ballard, who is a friend of the show, a guy that we have said should get fired on the show many of times, mostly coming from me, and then finally a trade. So let's first work out that. Do we think it's about ownership change? Do we think it's about GM change, or do you think it's about confirming the future that Mike Conley and Marc Gasol might get traded, Ricky?
Oh, I'm going to say trade, because with this ownership, they've already shown me that if their jobs are on the line, they're going to get rid of whoever they can to save face. They already did it with Fizdale. Remember, it was the whole, Fizdale or Marc Gasol, and now what? 2 years later, we're already talking about, 1 year later, already talking about trading Marc Gasol when I told them they shouldn't have gotten rid. They got rid of the wrong guy, basically. So with me, this question is easy. Yeah, trade them both, start all over, blow it up. Get your first-round pick this year, start all over from square one, which would be getting a new GM too.
Dave, my thing is looking at this. I don't know if I buy the whole this is what ownership's done, at least, because last year was a different, I think, conversation because Marc Gasol and Fizdale were fighting. Obviously, they had their own beef, and it was just pretty much one or the other. And I don't think Fizdale was taking this team anywhere with Gasol or without Gasol. So I think it wasn't too bad of a change. But I do look at it, and maybe it is time to just start clean, not only with this roster, but there's talks of the owner selling, which obviously brings in the fact that this means Memphis might get moved. It's a possibility, at least. Do you think that's the biggest thing that's on the mind? Like, if these two players get moved, before you say if they are going to get moved, if they do get moved, does that open this team up to getting sold and getting moved?
Oh, yeah, I think all three are on the table. 100%. I think Memphis, for as much as you don't want to watch a city lose a team, I think they are one of the least popular TV markets as far as games go. I think that one of the biggest problems is you have to captivate people, but also you're stuck in such a small market where you're not going to be a free agent. Like, you're not going to easily pull in free agents due to that market size, due to the city itself. And Memphis is an awesome city, don't get me wrong, but as a basketball town, it is not. So I think that, yes, you're up for relocation. I think, yes, you should get a new GM. I think this team needs to go in a new direction. You've ridden out the end of grit and grind to the bare bones. There's nothing left of it. Like, we're watching worn down Marc Gasol at this point. Mike Conley, who is not quite all there, but he's still a good player. Is he a $30 million player? I don't think so, but somebody might value his contract for a couple years. But yeah, I think it's all on the table. I think this is a blow it up situation, and I'm looking at Seattle, I'm looking at Vegas, and I'm like, hey, let's do this. Let's get a new GM. Let's move the team.
I don't know if ownership has to do with something. Second time they moved, though,
yeah, I miss Vancouver.
Oh, yeah.
I do too.
They moved 95 or 99, I think it was around there.
I honestly don't know the season. I just remember
The 2001, 2002 was their first year in Memphis.
Yeah. I remember Vancouver, and I remember their awesome green unis. And
with the Grizzly jumping out of front.
So, no, I think that it was a failed experiment. It's okay to fail, NBA. But you got two cities clamoring in the West.
I will say that is true, and you won't have to realign. because maybe you'll realign the divisions, but that doesn't really matter too much. Both of them stay in the western side of the country. And I will say the Grizzlies fans at least have shown up. I mean, they're not dead last in attendance. Pistons are dead last, at least percentage-wise, when it comes to filling up the stadium at 76.1%. Nets are at 79%. Timberwolves 79.7%. Hawks at 80%. Suns at 80.3%. Hornets at 84.1%. Wizards at 85.1%. And then Grizzlies at 85.7%. So, Memphis is showing up to these games, and this team isn't that good. So I will give the fans of Memphis credit. I think they are supporting the team as much as they can. But like you said, this is a smaller TV market, and there's not a lot to be made out of Memphis. Even when this team was great, you never thought of them as a true powerhouse to get a free agent, to really grow. They took a reclamation.
They're just a dark horse.
Yeah, they took a reclamation project in Zach Randolph. They hit on Mike Conley with the 10th pick, and then they got Marc Gasol in a trade for his brother Paul. So, I mean, it's something that...
Which, that trade, looking back on it, at the time, didn't seem so fair, but over the years,
it turned out being great because they got, franchise center, defensive player of the year, Marc Gasol, and obviously the grit and grind led him to a great play. But even then, you think of Memphis and you think of kind of a... what's it called? You think of a gimmick. You think of grit and grind. You don't think of a great team, a powerhouse. You think of, they had three great players, and Mike Conley, Zach Randolph, and Marc Gasol, and they weren't able to turn into anything. I think this kind of just says, like, hey, I'm thinking about selling my stakes because I think he's over 50% over. I want to say Rob Pelinka because it's very similar, but it's not Rob Pelinka, the GM of the Lakers. But I just think it's something where it's like, I'm thinking about selling this team.
Robert J. Pera. P-E-R-A.
And I think this might lead to somebody coming in and swooping up this team. It'd be sad for the city of Memphis. It's a close town to us, not too far away. But I think it does open up the ability to trade Marc Gasol because you look at it, $24.1 million this year. He's got a player option for $25.5. I don't think that's terrible. Obviously, he hasn't been super consistent this year, but the flashes are great. And if you take down his minutes just a little bit and you push him off the bench, I think he'd be absolutely dominant because him going up against second units would be disgusting. You look at a team like Boston, if they had the cap space to make that deal work, that would be
Gordon Hayward that they're not using.
Yeah,
I mean,
but then you take on another contract. Like
Memphis loves hurt wings, right? Like, isn't that their jam?
But then, then you have Chandler Parsons and Gordon Hayward's contract, which just looks like absolutely horrible.
They're collecting injured white wings. I don't know what you're talking about.
Mike Conley's on the books right now for $30.5 million this year, $30.2.5 next year, and he's got a player option for $34.5 next year. So that in 2020-21. So that one's going to be the worst one to move. Which one? But he is a better player. So, Ricky, if one is going, which one will go?
If I had to choose between Mark and Mike, I'm going to go with Mike. And the reason being is I feel like there's more. You know what? It's a double-edged sword. I'm going to say that. I'm going to say Mike because there's more, I want to say, use for a point guard. And there's more teams out there that are point guard needy. However, the double edge of it, Marc Gasol has a player option for next year. So if you're somewhere where like, hey, he's going to hate it here, let's trade for him and he'll not take the player op. And then look at how much money we have. Like if you're one of those teams trying to get some cap room, like let's say you're Washington and you're like, we just want expiring contracts. Well, let's get Marc Gasol for the last half of this year. He's going to hate being here. And then we get that almost $30 million off the books. That's where the two sides where I would go Mike Conley, not Mike Gasol. Mike Conley gets moved because a team like maybe Utah or a team like Detroit or a team that needs a point guard or could use a point guard might go after him because of what the skill set is in the NBA right now.
My thing with Gasol, possibly getting traded and then, not liking it and not picking up his player option, the biggest thing with that to me would just be... How
much money are you going to get after? Like with a new contract? Like is a team going to pay you what you were getting?
That and injuries.
Yeah.
It's just because, he has had injury issues before, and then if he does get injured, there's no way he's not taking that. What were you saying?
I got a spicy meatball for you.
Throw it out.
I think Mike Conley, I agree, even though there's a lot of teams that have point guards out there that are decent, but I know a desperate team looking to improve this year. And that's the New Orleans Pelicans. they've got Nico Mirotic, who I don't think they want to pay next year. I think his injuries and his defensive weaknesses have led them to be like, you're good, we like you, but we've got Randall. We can't have you and Randall both on this team. So I think Nico, Solomon Hill, pick Mike Conley.
It works out.
It does.
So how would you think that would work out, at least for New Orleans then?
Awesome.
Because obviously we talked about Drew. We talked about how he played with Rajon.
Exactly.
What do you think that would take this to this team? Because when you see Drew and good old AD out on the floor, they dominate. They're one of the best teams, at least when those two are on the floor. When they're off it, or I think one of them's off it, they drop from to like a negative 15 net rating. I think they're like a plus 15 with both of them on there, and then a negative 15 rating out there. What would Conley do that would help this New Orleans Pelicans team?
He does everything they want. He plays pretty good defense still. I mean, I know the knock on him is his health as well, but I think he's still playing pretty good defense. I think his shooting, well, not as good as everybody wants it to be. He's still a good shooter. He's still able to stretch the floor for this team. Gives them another guard in that backcourt who can defend 1 through 3 pretty well. So like he and Drew next to each other, and guess what? It's like another like FU to the Portland Trailblazers. Like I would love to see that matchup again, just for the jokes, to be like, oh, Portland Pelicans again. How's this one gonna work out? It's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt a lot. I think it helps them match up against teams like that. I don't know if they could beat the Rockets, but I think that adding Mike Conley to this team puts them in that conversation. Now, I know James Harden right now is in the hottest streak we've ever seen in our lifetime, but he won't be that way. I don't expect him to be playing 50-plus points a night in the playoffs. I think that Chris Paul, James Harden versus Mike Conley, Drew Holiday is a closer matchup than a lot of people expect because Anthony Davis just completely unbalances Clint Capella. Yes, he's good, but Clint Capella can't touch Anthony Davis. So I think that three-man matchup versus the Rockets way in the favor of the Pelicans. They have depth on their side, which is not something you get to say often as a Pelicans fan. You have Drew. You have not Drew. You have Julius Randle off the bench, or they can run with that interesting starting lineup.
Randle at the 5, AD at the 4.
Yeah.
Well, that's like I'm going to take your Western Conference team and raise you one. It's a different one that I could also look at. Same situation. Well, similar. They're in the one I'm looking at is in the playoffs right now. If it started today, Utah. We'll take Mike Conley. We'll give you Derek Favors. We'll give you Dante Exum. Where Exum hasn't performed well in Utah, in Memphis could be a change of scenery, could be a good place for him to just get his mindset and maybe be the player that we thought he could be or make a good player in Memphis. And then Derek Favors could be a guy where it's like, hey, this now keeps Jaren Jackson at the 4, and he could be a veteran big that you can play along with Jaren Jackson. And also Memphis would probably get like a 2020 first, or not this year's first, and next year's first that has like maybe a top 15, top 20 protection to it.
Interesting. Why do you think that Utah needs to make that move?
Like, part of me looks at it where, first off, Ricky Rubio's number 1. Could be gone at the end of the year. So this could be a little bit of a preemptive, like, hey, if Ricky leaves, we still have a point guard to play with Donovan Mitchell. Second off, Mitchell needs help, like he does. And this is a team that was out of the playoffs. Now they're in the playoffs. Are they just going to be, hey, we're going to sit on our laurels? This is the team that Quinn Snyder can get into the playoffs? Or could they say, hey, Memphis ain't using them. We can use them and make a not playoff run, but get into playoffs. And then once we get into the playoffs, I'll hold bars. Yeah, anything can happen.
They beat OKC last year.
And right now they'd be paired up against Denver, which, yes, Denver's been insane this year.
Yes.
But let's see what happens in the playoffs with a Denver team that's never been there before. Well, this collective unit hasn't been to the playoffs before.
I think the thing with Utah is just they're not a team that makes too many trades, and especially adding someone who has that much money onto their contract, I don't know if that's going to be the best way to spend the limited salary that Utah is always playing with. Because I think the cap's like, near 129? 129 million? I mean, so that means Conley's taken up like, about, I hate doing math on a podcast, 30% of your
Yeah, he's got 30 mil this year.
25% of your salary cap?
30 times 4.
But I mean, think about it though. You're getting rid of
120.
That doesn't help me out.
You're getting rid of the 9.6 mil that Exum would be.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the year, like we already talked about in our first segment, Ricky Rubio is are we thinking he's going to stay in Utah? Like there's a chance, but honestly, like do you honestly
it's not
think
who's
going to
stay. It's just your Rubio's worth like $12 million right now.
14.9.
14. So you're adding double that worth of salary. It's more about the salary for Utah. It's not about who you can bring in. It's how can you keep depth on this team and keep you under the salary cap? Because Favors is going to come off the books. Rubio is going to come off the books. Yes, and
Yeah,
I don't
but
think
Favors would be in this deal.
I know, but I'm saying if you don't make this trade.
Yeah.
I'm just saying if you don't make
Favors
this
still
trade
up
off.
for next year as well.
Yeah.
So he's
Is he? I thought he was 1 year
16.9.
deal.
No, he's got 2.
Okay, my bad. So Favors would help at least with that, but
Yep.
I just don't see like they need to use their salary cap extremely well, and I think adding Conley, who's going to take up 25% of your cap, is going to be very detrimental to what you can do with this team, because you look at how many young players they do have under contract, how many guys that are just waiting for to turn that corner. Exum was one of those guys, and he obviously hurt his ankle when he finally got a spot.
Hurt.
Yeah, and he even had some nice games there. He had like 13 assists or like 11 in the first half.
He plays well when he plays.
Yeah, it's just something that he has never turned that corner. I think he needs to turn that corner.
With the young player comment, the only thing is I'm not worried about it because right now Conley is under 3 years. His contract comes up the exact time that Donovan Mitchell's comes up. So Mike Conley comes up. Okay, that's gone. We're going to pay Don Mitch with that money now.
Right. My question for you would be, is he in your timeline?
For
Mike Conley, the Utah Jazz.
For the Grizzlies or for the Jazz,
Because
I
that's a
think
team
so.
where I'm like, you've got 2 great pieces in Gobert and Don Mitchell.
Yeah.
And I want to say that you should just sit on it and build up, because there's no way you're going to win against 5 All-Stars this year. Next year, it's going to be a toss-up in the West. So I think maybe there's a chance next year that could be interesting, but then they would lack depth at the 4 without Favors. I know he's a small ball 5 skill set wise.
Yeah.
So they run like double wings out there, which Jay Crowder's done an okay job. But I wonder if this is a team where they should look at taking on a bad contract in a trade to try to get another pick or go after those kind of mid-range guys with some upside.
See, I mean,
because I don't foresee this team being a championship contender.
I get what you're saying, and there's part of me that's like, yes, they could do that, and I'm not saying like, no, don't do that for sure,
yeah.
because that's an option. But like for me, what I think of what it's going to come down to is number one, what would you feel more confident in? Bringing in a Mike Conley who you might know exactly what you're going to get from him, or okay, what lesser contract guys can I get in free agency, and which one are you going to feel more confident in? If you're thinking, hey, I might be able to get a better player in Mike Conley and have to pay a little bit more money, then that may work. And the thing with giving up Derek Favors, if you're a playoff team, in our mock draft, Utah was at 11. They're going to be lower than that. If you look at where the playoff teams were, you've got guys in there like Jackson Hayes, who's a big, like Pascal, like Killian Tilly, like Jonte Porter. There are bigs there.
Porter's the biggest thing.
He's the one that's out.
You need to look at fours.
Yeah.
I would say throw out Hayes because he's just another rim runner.
And that's what I'm saying. Like there are 4s and 5s in that lower draft.
You have Gobert.
Fine. There's bigs. There's that 4. Those are there for you. And just because they're there in our mock draft, there might be ones that are a pick or 2 above that might fall there, and you can draft somebody at the 4 rather than saying we got to cling on to Derek Favors.
My thing is just it's not.
No, I know.
My thing is just like if you get rid of Favors, I think you should leverage that to just clear up cap space and not to make a free agency move, just to give yourself that much breathing room between yourself and the cap space. Because then when you go into next season, maybe you can take on, if you're struggling, you can take on a bad contract to get draft picks, and you even load up again. Because I think this is a team like Utah. You're never seeing big free agents go there. You need to build through the draft. I don't think bringing in Mike Conley to eat up, again, 25% of your cap is an ethical way or a smart way to use your your salary cap and a very limited one as well. I mean, because like this isn't a team that's going to go over the luxury tax at all. This is not a team that's going to be putting in has the ability to put in a ton of money. I just don't think using that limited space to bring in Mike Conley would be smart.
But I get what you're saying.
I don't want to stay on this topic.
No. The last thing I want to say is I get what you're saying, but if you look at it, all of their contracts and Mike Conley fits this exactly.
It's not about when it ends. It's not about when it ends. It's how much money he's making. That's what I'm saying. It's too much money.
If you don't have to pay someone right now, then I don't think it matters that much. If his contract's going to end when Gobert's does, when Ingles does, when Don Mitch's does, like they all end in the same year.
Why are you paying him? And that's what Dave was saying too. You're not winning a championship
because you think that he can add to your team better than Exum and Favors are.
But couldn't they just re-sign Rubio? Like that's
they
not
could re-sign Rubio, but I mean that's kind of the defaultest answer of like you're not going to beat the Warriors, so don't make a move at all.
But the thing is that if you can
you can prep yourself for the future, and because like I said, next year there's a chance because no one knows what's going to happen with like 30 top free agents in the league. It's going to be nuts. So maybe by having Mike Conley, yes, maybe next year. But I think they overachieved last year. I think they overachieved their expectations, and I don't think they're as good of a team as they think they are this year. Yes, they went out and added Kyle Korver because they were dreadful from the outside, and that's great that they're still making moves to try to position themselves better for the playoffs. But this is realistically a team that's not going to make it to the Western Conference Finals. I don't know if they make it to the second round.
Your two best players are 26 and 22. I just looked up Donovan Mitchell's age, and I just totally forgot. I think he's 22 years old. So your thing is, like, he's 22. So he's not going to hit his peak until 5 years. And Gobert is going to still be in his prime when, Mitchell finally hits his peak. So I just don't think there's a reason to go all in now to possibly get rid of, because if you take on Conley, there's less of an ability to take on more draft picks because you can, take on salary cap, take on more draft picks, and then hedge for the future. I think that's what you need to do is hedge for the future with these guys, and that's the biggest thing that I think you should do with your salary cap if you are Utah. And they've done a very good job over the past couple of years of doing that. You see again, they brought in Darren Williams, they drafted him. Carlos Boozer, they drafted him. Karolinko, they drafted them. They've consistently drafted the players that are on their team and consistently.
How many are still there though? Like Darren Williams was,
but that's
gone.
The thing is
Boozer traded, Karolinko gone.
Carlos Boozer was too expensive. They got rid of him. Darren Williams was too expensive. They had to get rid of him. Like that was the thing with this team is that you have these windows. You have these restrictions and windows that you have to work in. So you have to go for it at certain spots, and you're going to do that through the draft and through working up this young talent. And you're going to have to do that through not taking on $30 million of Mike Conley.
But the pin is they would get a first-round pick next year, too, from a Grizzlies team that is struggling.
We'll see. Let's move on, though, because I think another team that would be interesting is the Orlando Magic. Mike Conley going to the Orlando Magic. You get rid of that Mozgov contract, that Simmons contract, Jerry Grant. You bring in Conley. You also give up a first-round pick if you are Orlando. That's going to be intriguing for Memphis because I think this is something that, Orlando – do you technically need more young guys? I don't think so. Go for it. Like, see what you can do in the playoffs. Like, finally get your team back into the playoffs, back into that action. You can, in this East, that, 6th down is not that, dangerous at all. I think you should just go after it. Mike Conley bringing a veteran presence to this team, I think that would be huge for this team. I think that's one of the trades that I liked at least because then you get Mozgov's deal off, you get Simmons' deal off, you get Jaren Grant's deal off, and there's no big contracts coming up for Orlando at all. And that's one thing that, like, this isn't a team that's ever getting free agents, but also this is a team that's kind of in a window where Aaron Gordon's already signed, but he signed for $21 million, and that's going to go down over the couple of years, so it's going to make the salary cap a little bit easier. You look at Evan Fournier. Evan Fournier is on a 3-year deal. You have Vucevic. Like, they already have their veterans. And that's why I like Conley going over there because you're just adding veterans to this team that has veterans and a nice mix of young guys. And I think that's the spot that I would like the best for at least Conley, just because you're shifting to a team that's kind of already built. You're not trying to force your way into a former playoff team. You got to swing right into it, and he could probably provide that boost that this team needs at that point guard position. But with Marc Gasol, like, is there any ability that he's going to be getting traded this year?
I have one. I don't know if it goes through.
Well, Dave, what do you think? Because you've been quiet.
I think that Gasol can get traded. His contract does make it a little bit of pain for a lot of teams who are in need of centers. But with that being said, he still has enough talent, and because it is a 1-year contract at this point, right? 1 year, yes.
1 year old player.
Well, you got the player.
Right. So I think there's definitely value out there. I would love to see him go to a playoff team to help them because that's where he belongs. Like, he does his best work in the playoffs, and I would absolutely love to see him there. It's just the question of, is this Grizzlies team, or is this Grizzlies ownership going to recognize it's time to move on with the Joaquin Fowl and Jaren Jackson Jr. as the core of the franchise? I don't think they are. I think they're going to lock it down. I think they're going to sit on his contract. They're going to sit on Mike Conley's, and they're just going to be dicks about it.
So
they're going to suffer and lose. I'm sorry, Memphis. Like, I'm just.
And you picked the middle of the playoffs.
I wanted you to be.
And we saw this last year with Tyreek Evans.
They started
that they
off
did
so
not make
hot,
this move.
So just to start off, like last year, Mike Conley healthy, Gasol healthy, Tyreek Evans healthy. They're great. First 20 games, they look like gangbusters. They're going out there. They're gonna be a playoff team for sure. And then injury struck. I get it. That happens. This year, you look great to start the season again. Mike Conley exceeding expectations for his recovery time. His shot was a little off percentage-wise. His efficiency was not great. I think he was shooting absolute shit from three for the first month, but they were still winning games. And then all of a sudden, they went back to reality. Honestly, their strength of schedule was very weak at the beginning of the year, and then it obviously increased dramatically from then on. But that's just an excuse at this point because the team couldn't make buckets. I think this is a team that they're just destined to be. They're locked in with Gasol and Conley. I don't think that the franchise wants to move on from them because, like, well, that's our draw. Without them, where are we in the West? Because you're looking at teams like, I mean, even Phoenix has been at the top of the draft how many years, and they're still below us. Like, we can at least win games. There's some sense of respect. If they don't want to give up on Memphis, they're going to keep Gasol. They're going to keep Conley.
I think the thing, too, that Memphis hasn't been able to do, and like teams like Phoenix hasn't been able to do, is obviously draft and keep consistency on this team. And I think the Grizzlies are doing it too much to an extent of keeping consistency on a team, and Phoenix hasn't done it, done it enough, I think. And you look at a team like Utah, like, again, they have consistently moved on at the right points. I think that a team that might, stick in that realm of not moving on quick enough might be Portland. You look at Dame, you look at CJ. I don't know if they're ever going to move on at the right point from those guys. They moved on from LaMarcus, I think, from the right point.
Yeah.
Just because that team needed a change. They needed to clean up a little bit.
That was a leap of faith, too. Because, I mean, you're talking about you had a great point guard and a great four on that team, and they were successful. They just knew what the cap was. They saw the line, and they're like, we're never going to get above this with this lineup.
And I think that moving Gasol would be big, and I think that it would just be needed just to get kind of relief from this. I think you could probably keep Conley because he's still playing well. He's still, a fan favorite, and also he's a guy that I think he'll be easier to trade when it's an expiring deal.
I think he's even a guy who, even if he plays out, like, he would re-sign on a cheaper deal. Like, that's why I was.
But he's going to be, 34 at that point? Because right now I think he's 31.
Yeah.
So he's going to be around 33, 34 on that deal. So I don't know if
you get him on like a JJ, not quite as cheap as JJ Barea deal, but a pretty cheap deal for someone of his talents. And if he holds up, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I worry a little bit about that. Again,
I mean, hey, it's not John Wall bad.
But John Wall at that point is going to be 31, where Conley is now. So how healthy can he stay, John Wall, after he comes back from this current injury?
$50 million healthy?
He's only 47.
I'm sorry, $47 million healthy?
I know. But I just think that, again, Memphis has never moved on. And I think that now is just the time to cut it, even if you're not getting that value back.
Would Washington move John Wall?
I was just thinking about that. No, I was thinking, would they move him to Memphis?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Oh. I mean, who would you would take Conley for John Wall?
I mean, they'd have to throw something else in there. I don't know which way that would be worse. Who has to throw in something more on that deal? John Wall's contract is terrible in the future, but at least he's still in his prime.
Like a couple.
Mike Conley will be 34 by the end, and be only getting paid $34 million.
The good thing is it doesn't matter because John Wall's hurt, so it's not going to happen.
The Grizzlies would have to throw in picks because Conley's older.
I think you're right.
But he's cheaper.
Yeah, but he's older.
But he's cheaper.
He might not that's the only bad thing of he's 31 right now, where he's going to be 33. I think at the end of that deal, 34
he'll
maybe?
be 33.
Yeah.
At the end of his deal.
But he's cheaper
by maybe what 17.
Well,
million?
it's like 70 million for Conley's remaining. I think. Again, don't trust me because I don't know anything about math.
32 mil the following year, and then 34.5.
Yeah, John Wall's making 169 million next year for the next 4 years. So that's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, the one that
about $100 million difference.
I would think that the Grizzlies would have to throw in some picks. Maybe
I disagree with
maybe
that.
one of them's a pick swap where it's like, hey,
Yeah, whatever.
we'll think of it down the road.
Final thoughts on Memphis and Mike
I got one
Conley.
final trade to throw out. This is a
Marc
Marc
Gasol.
Gasol
Oh, yeah, that's
trade. The Rockets go ahead and get him. They give up Brandon Knight, PJ Tucker, Melo, and Gerald Green. Gives them enough cap to free up for Gasol. Plus, they have to add Gerald Green because then they get rid of that so they can bring in Fareed as well. And give Fareed.
Well, no, I think they're getting rid of Nunnally.
They are.
To bring in Fareed.
Then you can keep Green, and it's just
Which is good 'cause he can shoot.
then it's just Melo, PJ, and Brandon Knight for Gasol and maybe some picks in there.
Now you're going to have Parsons and Melo on the same team. You got to add something, though, to that because I don't think you're getting any value outside of
Well, for the Grizzlies, it's just
the Rockets.
Brandon Knight's done after 2 years. Melo is $1.5 million that's off
he's
at the end of the
mid-level.
year.
Yeah.
And then PJ Tucker's a guy where, it's 7.9 for 3 years, but like that's a lot smaller than
He's a
what
guy
Marc
that
Gasol is.
he's a guy that you just turn around and trade.
Yeah.
But I would value
Houston's
though,
probably
like,
gonna have to
to
give
help
up
you out because I mean you're getting rid
a
of
first and a second.
you're getting rid of the face of your franchise and you're just getting PJ Tucker.
Yeah.
So
You
I mean,
give up
there's
your
going
first,
to be
maybe.
picks in there, but I mean.
Well,
Yeah.
you gotta say these things out loud.
Yeah, I said it first.
all right, we're gonna wrap it up. So that's our thoughts on the Mike Conley, Marc Gasol situation.